So, as we know, the housing market continues to be a pretty devastating place for anyone either looking to buy or rent. So the Pandora Papers revealed that billionaires across the world, incredibly wealthy individuals across the world, were relying on tax shelters to avoid having to pay their fair share of taxes on their earnings, on their lucrative fortunes and all of that. But now we're also learning about how institutional Wall Street investors and foreign money is essentially pouring into US real estate and not only pricing ordinary Americans out of the market, but more importantly, they are taking certain opportunities away from working families, especially in neighborhoods that used to be affordable to an average American. And the latest story, it's an in-depth, fantastic piece of reporting by the Washington Post, believe it or not, goes into detail in regard to Progress Residential. And if you do a quick YouTube search on Progress Residential, you'll see how many of the renters across the country have to deal with the slumlords that essentially run these properties after they purchase them from the market with all cash offers. Now, the venture, Progress Residential, acquires as many as 2,000 homes a month, okay? 2,000 homes a month through the use of a computerized property search algorithm and swift all-cash offers. Progress executives boast that the company's efficient management practices have been a boon to their tenants who cannot afford to buy one of the entry-level homes. And then what do? Look, we've covered similar stories in the past. These institutional investors buy these single residential homes in bulk, and then they don't even flip them. They just turn them into rentals, and they essentially become slumlords. So Progress Residential has been ringing up substantial profits for wealthy investors around the world, meaning foreign investors, while outbidding middle-class home buyers and subjecting tenants to what they allege are unfair rent hikes, shoddy maintenance, and excessive fees. And we're also gonna get into some details in regard to how these foreign investors are able to skirt paying their fair share of taxes as a result of the industry essentially pushing to ensure that these investments get taxed differently from any other type of income. So let me get to some more details about what one resident, for instance, told the Washington Post about this whole situation. "All we can tell you is it's been bad," said Ashley Baltimore, a delivery driver who, with her husband, rents one of the company's houses on Tammy Sue Lane for $2,020 a month. That's up more than 30% from when they moved in 2016, roughly in line with the area's rapidly rising rates. Now, it's interesting, why is that area experiencing rapidly rising rates? Well, it could be because so many homes in that county have been bought up by this Wall Street investor. So let's take a look at the specific street that was mentioned, okay, Tammy Sue Lane. The homes that are highlighted there are homes that were purchased by Progress Residential, okay? So almost the entirety of Tammy Sue Lane in Tennessee has been purchased by the Progress Residential institutional investor here. But why don't we actually zoom out and look at a broader map of that area and see just how many, oh wow, look at that. All of those red marks indicate the homes that have been purchased by this Wall Street investor. Homes that used to be affordable, homes that used to be obtainable by working Americans in Tennessee, and now they are out of reach. Now they are only available as rentals. And since you have this one Wall Street investor buying up most of the homes in this area, they essentially monopolize the market in this area, right? And they get to not only jack up the rents, they can basically get away with essentially just neglecting the properties that they buy. And you will see story after story, video after video of renters who are furious at the conditions that they're living in and the lack of attention and care they receive from their slumlords. That's who these institutional investors are. And again, it's not just investors here in the United States. We're talking about foreign investors as well. So let's get to some more details. Well, what's the result of all of this? Well, Rutherford County, where Tammy Sue Lane is located, ranked as the 5th least affordable US county for home buyers when considering wages in the area, according to the real estate data firm Adam Data Solutions. In all, Progress Residential owns more than 1,500 houses in Rutherford County alone. Okay, but we're just talking about one county. They're doing this across the country. And we're just talking about one Wall Street investor, institutional investor. As we've talked about on this show before, there are many. So when we talk about a housing crisis in this country, understand that these institutional investors play a huge role. Foreign investors looking to launder their money play a huge role. And right now, we have Democrats in charge of Congress. We have a Democratic president who claims he cares so much about doing something about affordable housing. I mean, the proof is in the pudding, right? His Build Back Better agenda, which just got blocked by Joe Manchin, included about $150 billion, which was supposed to be allocated to build affordable housing. But you can build as much affordable housing as you want. If you don't deal with what's taking place right now, with these all cash offers being given by these Wall Street investors, you're not gonna solve the affordable housing problem at all. Okay, it's not even on Biden's radar. You don't even see Democratic lawmakers talking about this issue. That's what's so infuriating about the debates that you see going on right now about the lack of affordable housing. All they talk about is, I don't know, let's just throw some money at it. Maybe if we can convince Joe Manchin to put his corruption aside for 1 second and do something that helps the American people. But even if they were able to accomplish that, it still doesn't solve the problem. Because you still have a systemic issue with Wall Street greed, with these investors pouring in, snatching up all available homes, and essentially cornering the market as these slumlords. Now, the county's property assessor, who, by the way, is a Republican. This isn't a Democrat or Republican issue, okay? This is a corporate greed, Wall Street greed issue. The county property assessor says this: these ventures are equity mining our community, removing generational wealth for an entire demographic of people. For the average person starting out, wanting to start their family, the choice is no longer, can I purchase a house? It's instead, can I afford to even rent a house? That's how dire this situation is. Now, what is the deal with Progress Residential? Like, what is this corporation? What is this institutional investor? Who's behind it? I think it's important to know. Now, behind Progress Residential is Pretium Partners, a New York-based investment firm whose business plan and investors are revealed in the Pandora Papers, a trove of offshore financial records obtained by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. Okay, so there's been a lot of reporting about the Pandora Papers. If you maybe missed some of that reporting, you can definitely check it out on our YouTube channel. We've talked about it, we've covered it. And it gives you a sense of just how far the greed goes. Not just, obviously there's greed in the United States, but it's an international problem. These tax shelters, all these games, all these tricks that the most wealthy people across the globe engage in just to avoid paying taxes. It's pretty incredible stuff. Now, the plan sought to exploit, and this is an important part of the story, the plan sought to exploit the 2008 US housing crash, which forced millions of homeowners into foreclosure and left a glut of cheap houses for sale. The financiers' plan called for buying up tens of thousands of these properties at depressed prices and then renting them to families who had lost their homes or, because of tightened lending practices, could no longer qualify for a mortgage. So at that point, you see these institutional investors reaching out for capital, reaching out for the money necessary to make these all cash offers and snatch up all these homes that American families had lost for the lowest price possible. And they have seen incredible profits as a result of this venture. So Pretium made legal arrangements so such foreign investors would have limited exposure to US taxes, according to tax experts. And look, what's sick about all of this, other than the fact that Americans are getting priced out of their own neighborhoods, other than the fact that Americans are finding it increasingly difficult to pay for a roof over their heads, is the fact that the very people who crashed the economy in 2008, the very crash that foreclosed on millions of Americans across the country, they're also the same people who turned around and benefited from that economic collapse. In fact, someone who's associated with this specific investor, institutional investor, was very much involved in the predatory practices leading up to the 2008 economic collapse. While the documents do not identify most of the other investors, they show that an outsized share of the potential profit was earmarked for Donald Mullen Jr., founder and chief executive of Pretium Partners. Mullen is well known in financial circles for his tenure at Goldman Sachs, where he helped oversee that firm's lucrative bet against US housing and mortgage markets ahead of the 2008 crisis. That bet, a strategy popularly known as the Big Short, allowed Goldman to profit as markets plummeted. And look, we also need to address the fact that in 2008, Democrats had an opportunity to help ordinary Americans, okay? 2008, you've got the Obama administration, okay? You have a super majority in Congress. Democrats are large, in charge, and they can actually respond to the 2008 economic collapse in a way that regulates Wall Street in a robust way. Of course, they didn't actually do that. Dodd-Frank, which is the only regulation that came out from that economic collapse, was a joke, okay? Incredibly weak, which is why you continue to see sky-high profits in Wall Street. But they also had an opportunity to ensure that Americans got to keep their homes while the very people who crashed the economy would get punished, but they didn't do that. So as a result, in 2008 alone, lenders foreclosed on the loans for more than 3 million homes. That's just 2008. And home prices, of course, sank. And that trend continued into the Obama administration. Obama didn't bail out ordinary Americans, but he did bail out Wall Street. And I have a huge problem with that. And how did he do it, right? When I say bail out, I'm specifically referring to the Federal Reserve's policy of easing, QE, where they want to provide liquidity to these banks. They want to make sure that these banks have the capital necessary to lend to people, to ensure that small businesses can keep running, ordinary Americans can qualify for loans and maybe buy a modest home. It's supposed to keep the economy running because you want to make sure that there's enough capital for these financial institutions to give to ordinary people. But that money never trickled down to ordinary people. They used the money to snatch up the real estate out there, the foreclosed homes on the cheap. And what did they do? They just became slumlords. That's all they did with it. Did it help the ordinary American? Part of the reason why we're experiencing the housing crisis today is because we had and continue to have a government that favors Wall Street investors over ordinary American workers. And so I don't think just throwing a couple hundred billion dollars at our housing crisis is gonna solve a damn thing. It's putting a Band-Aid on a gushing wound. We now have institutional investors, several of them, that are buying up all of these homes across the country, all cash offers. You can't even compete with them. And this isn't just about owning a home, which, by the way, was really the last vehicle for American workers to build wealth in this country. It goes beyond that. Because when you have this type of inflation in regard to properties that are available on the market to buy, that also bleeds into the price of rentals, which is why so many Americans are experiencing a huge spike in their rent, even in the middle of a global pandemic. No, housing should be, and I consider it to be, a basic human right. Everyone deserves a safe place to live, a roof over their heads, everyone. I mean, we keep hearing all these stories about how fantastic this country is, how this is the land of opportunity. This is the greediest country in the world. It really is. We allow pharmaceutical companies to have monopolies on life-saving drugs. We allow pharmaceutical companies to charge us whatever the hell they want for life-saving drugs. We don't treat healthcare as a human right. We don't treat housing as a human right. In this country, if you don't have the money to compete with the demands of Wall Street investors, you're screwed. No roof over your head, no life-saving drugs to keep you alive. This is the American dream. And it doesn't matter if there's a Democrat or Republican in the White House. It's always the same, and it'll continue to be the same unless there's outside pressure. Congress isn't gonna do a damn thing for us unless there's outside pressure, unless there's organized efforts to essentially apply the pressure necessary to force them to actually represent us. Otherwise, all we're doing is fighting with each other on Twitter, okay? Indulging, easily hurt children who can't handle words like cracker and feel like they're the ones who are aggrieved. We're always constantly just distracted with garbage, okay? What really matters right now is ensuring that people's basic needs are met. And while we are distracted, we're allowing these Wall Street investors to run amok day in, day out with the help of Democrats and Republicans, and I'm sick of it.
Thanks for watching the Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.